One thing, just to kind of talk about the extra takes I did. The first one, I thought I could have, like I was saying, I could have nailed the second verse a little bit cleaner, a little bit more aggressive into the chorus with the fill, like that transition. And then doing that second chorus, I felt like was much better, just nailing all the eighth notes on the kick drum, making sure that they're all really driving in there.
Yeah, you can see right here on the waveform that they're all super consistent.
And there was a couple fills too that I just wanted to make sure that were really defined and clear. Sometimes when you're doing like those sort of flammy fills, like fa-pra-dum, things like that. I know it sounds funny, but when you do things like that, there's very little space between the notes, so it's really important to try to, make sure everything stands out clearly.
Yeah.
And then for the kind of the bridge section, I just wanted to make sure it had that attack that it needs. It's a very open section. I know everybody's laughing at me making the booms and bops and things
That's
like
great.
that, but with that groove, it's just really important to be as open and as fluid as possible with the movements, kind of talking about staying within that kind of space behind the beat a bit. So I was really trying to capture that the second time through with the China.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the end was just simply kind of how you would push me to do it when we recorded the record. One way, kind of really simple, straightforward, clean, being very wary of the vocal parts.
Yep.
And then the second take was completely with no regard for the vocals.
Nope.
And that might be something that when you get to the end of a tour, if you're really bored, you kind of do live and the band members are kind of laughing about that. And it's like, oh, show off a little bit. But
I think
it's not really that cool.
I think it's really cool. I'm not going to lie. I think that's really cool. But
I just think it's one of those examples where it works in the song without the vocals, but once the vocals are there, it's a very thin line between playing busily tasteful or playing very busy and stepping on toes. So that's not just, I want to make a point to say that's something you could do, but it might not be the best decision for the song. And again, you really want to let the song dictate what parts you play. Like that should govern really what final take you go with.
Totally.
So are you labeling right now? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, as I'm looking at time and how much comping we have to do and how many questions I want to get through, I think we should take questions and then comp in the next segment. Does that sound good?
that's totally fine. I mean, the comping is going to be, it doesn't even need to really happen on the camera. All I'll really say is when it comes to comping, as a general rule, a technical rule, I always try to make a comp on a snare hit.
Okay.
That's just a really good
way to
technique to try and do it. The snare, if there is some difference in the cymbal decay or something, the snare is always so loud and distracting that it really helps smooth the transition. So I'm just making sure that we have everything we need, which we definitely do. So
perfect. You nailed it. Nice job.
Thank you. It's nerve-wracking. Like I said, it's when everything's going, you're rolling. Everybody's watching you. It's kind of like, oh, I hope I don't screw up. Something stupid. Because you can under pressure.
That was good. So Thomas has a question. Hey, Nolly, how would you use these samples inside a session? Using a program like Slate Trigger to fatten things up, or actually replacing tom hits, which have too much cymbal bleed in them? Is that how you'd use them, or how?
Yeah, it's kind of both.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't use Trigger on this session at all.
Okay.
Sorry. If I really like these drum sounds, I might make a Trigger file, and there might be some point in the future where I'm sent something to mix where the kick drum is just played really badly, or maybe they only used one microphone, and I can make a Trigger file of just like the outside kick mic or something to supplement. So we have like the real track of just like the inside mic, and then I can create like a fake outside mic or something like that. When I use samples with Trigger, I try to keep them natural. I don't process them. I'll just export them as they are raw, so that I can blend them with the natural drum tones and then process the two together in a holistic way. In the case of this session, I'm probably most likely to look at the section where he's hitting the Spock through the and hitting through the toms. I've got a feeling the bleed's going to be crazy on that. It always is. It's a shame because Chinas and floor toms go really well together. There's so many great beats where, you're hitting two things on the right side of the kit, not just you, but other drummers. It sounds great in person, but microphones hate that. In that case, if the bleed is really bad and every time there's a floor tom hit, you hear coming through from the China, I might well I'll cut up these samples tonight, but I might just physically drop it in, make sure it's sample aligned. I won't use the same sample every time, but I don't like to do that. I like to keep everything as natural as I can, but if I really need to, that's what I'll do.
Awesome. What input, like dB levels, are you aiming for when you're recording each track? It seems like some of the tracks are being recorded quite hot.
Yeah, and
That was just a Pro Tools issue, though.
I hope that's a Pro Tools issue.
Yeah.
I generally like to get about -6
Okay.
peak on anything. This whole thing, like, I don't know if it seems really slow to the people watching, but for us, it's going by like that. And we're not really having time to do all the checks and measures that we might do. So it might be that later when I'm back home, I'm like, oh, this is really hot and clipping. I hope that the snare mic is all right.
The reality is you won't wait till you're home. You're going to listen tonight when you leave, and then...
That's what I mean, like tonight.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as the
As in
cameras
the-
are off, I'm going to be listening to this stuff. But
Yeah.
hopefully people at home can understand that we would take a bit of extra time and make sure that everything is completely good before signing off on it. But yeah, generally -6 is about the limit that I'd let things peak. I try not to track things too hot that aren't going to be too loud in the mix. I hate when you get sent a session or get files to mix from a band and you import the drum tracks and everything is basically normalized and you hit play and all you hear is hi-hat close mic, like ride close mic. You know, all the spot mics end up being so loud. And you have to pull the faders all the way down and clip gain stuff. I like it if I can just import files, pan them, and have some sort of mix going. So it's not always possible, but I try not to track like the bottom snare super hot or the spot mics on the cymbals.
Cool.
I just focus on the main things that need to be really hot.
Cool. Somebody wants to know if you can recap all the microphone names.
Absolutely,
Which you do have them all. I'm sure you have them all memorized.
Yeah.
But if you missed that earlier.
Yeah, and maybe
go
we can
through
even create a
most.
text file that can go with
Yeah.
the session. I don't know if people want that. But yeah, so on the kick drum, we have a Shure Beta 91A, which is the condenser microphone inside the kick. We have an AKG D112, and then we have a Sennheiser E602 Mark I outside the kick drum. On the snare, we have a Shure Beta 57. It's actually an old one. It looks a little bit different to the modern ones. The sound is not that different.
Some people may know that as a Beta 57.
Okay. Beta.
Yeah.
Shure
If you're
Beta
from
57
England,
on the snare. And then there is Sennheiser MD441 underneath the snare. And that's quite an old microphone. They still make them, but that's like a more vintage one again. The toms all have Josephson E22S's on them, which are those side address condensers. Then the overheads are a pair of AKG C414 EBs, which are the very first iteration of the C414s they made. Those are original ones with the gold ringed capsules, which were only made for a short time. They're kind of the holy grail of those ones, so I was very happy when I finally got myself a pair of those. Then the close mics are all Bayer Dynamic MC930s. There's two of those. There's one on the China and hi-hat. And then the two under mics on the spot and ride are Shure KSM 109s.
Yep, that's right.
Which belong to the studio, which I haven't used before, but they're pretty flat, I think, condensers. Then the room mics, we've got a pair of Neumann KM84s on the stereo bar, Neumann U87 in figure 8 above that, and then the Gefels, I forget
Yeah,
what
the
the
Microtech Gefell. I don't
those
remember
are
the
weird
model number.
microphones. Yeah, they're not written in here, are they? We can find out the model number. You know, you really don't hear very many people using those. Again, they belong to the studio or belong to Zach.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
Zach's.
I've just called them Gefels in this session, so I forget what they are. They're weird, like very bulbous-looking microphones,
Yeah.
but they're cool.
UMT, Zach just said, UMT 800s.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yep.
UMT.
UMT 800s. What's your opinion on drum replacement, and when would you recommend using it? And how do you mix it well in a mix?
Drum
so you just talked a little bit
replacement.
about
Yeah.
replacing like
My opinion
certain
of drum
mics.
replacement is really tied to like the reason why I would have to do drum replacement, which is generally that things were done not very well,
Improperly,
which I dislike.
I mean, like the whole.
in
I think the whole
principle.
point of this class is to show how to avoid needing
Yeah.
to do drum replacement.
I would replace something if, I guess, 3 reasons. One, the drummer was not performing well enough. In other words, he wasn't hitting consistently enough to get a consistent tone and volume out of the drum. 2, the drum sounds really bad, which is either like poor choice of drum, poor tuning, poor choice of microphone, or it could be like, if this was the case, I'd try and use a bit of it, but if there's a ton of bleed in that mic because they haven't positioned it in an optimal way, I'd still try and use a bit of it just to have that there. But I would supplement that with a sample, but I wouldn't necessarily replace. And then the third reason would be, it's kind of tied, but if they just tracked something really well, but it was, once we start mixing, it becomes apparent that actually what they tracked and what their vision of the final sound was is just not congruent. Like they tracked a super high pingy snare, which sounds great, but then the drummer says, oh, I want a real low-fat Dave Grohl snare.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, did it. That would be the other reason to do it. I'd say the drum that gets most commonly replaced would be the kick drum. Mm-hmm. I very rarely like to fully replace things, though. Augmentation is way more the way I like to go. And I have a whole stock of samples that I've made, even just in my bedroom. A load of the samples that I've used, and I do occasionally use samples on, especially on stuff I mix for other people, are samples that I've made myself just in my mix room, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a very dead room. And it will just be close mics only, let's say on the snare drum, and it will be me doing my right-handed snare hits, which are good enough for that purpose. And I'll create like a TCI of that. Leave it raw, and then I can treat it like it's a real snare. I don't really like when I have a sample that's super pre-processed, and not only does that not give me very much direction, but then it becomes almost like a parallel EQ, almost like you're blending that with a raw sound. And there's two things, instead of working together, you're kind of just, it's almost like you're applying like an EQ, like you're really boosting some areas up in it. So I prefer a sound that's totally natural, that I can blend with that. I also really like to match the tuning of the sample to what I'm replacing. So if there's a really badly recorded snare drum that I'm trying to keep the vibe of and I want to sample replace it, I will tune a snare drum from my collection to be very close to what I'm hearing in the raw track, and maybe the people listening don't even, like the clients maybe, don't even realize that I've replaced the snare. But that happens very rarely.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
This question got 7 upvotes. Spider asked it. Tuning question: how do you deal with crosstalk between the rack toms and the snare drum? Depending upon the tuning, at times hitting the rack toms activates the snare wires on the snare.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
I don't care that much about it. It's actually not as annoying as you think it is when you hear the mic tracks. It's like really loud in person, but drums are so much louder than you think they are. Like when you see the peaks on a waveform, it's so much louder. Like sometimes weird resonances that you hear in drums, or rattles, or snare wires buzzing a bit too much doesn't really come across. But I don't tune like we were talking about earlier, like the rack tom being tuned to like a D, and then the snare being an E. I probably wouldn't tune them both to a D, because like the rack tom is going to be much closer in pitch. On this kit, what we just tracked, like the first floor tom is an E. The snare is an E, but there wasn't too much crosstalk or anything going on. If it was really a problem, I'd just shift one or the other by a semitone, as long as it didn't clash with the key of the song.
Cool. One more question. I'd like to ask how to know which position is adequate for overheads, both in height and placement around the kit. Thanks in advance. So I guess what's a sort of a range, and then an idea.
Yeah.
We're at 4 feet.
Yeah,
in here.
I really like the 4 feet thing. One thing I didn't mention, by the way, was the distance between them, which is not really answering the question, but while we're talking about overheads, because Matt's kit's really wide, they're actually about 4 feet apart. I don't really like going that much wider than 4 feet. You start to lose the focus in the middle. A lot of kits are closer to 3 feet apart. There's something nice about having like an equilateral triangle. I don't think it makes any difference sound-wise, but it's like the holy grail. I'd be happy for no reason if that worked out.
You said Holy Grail more than Dave Grohl so far.
Have I?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Man.
We got to bring back the Dave Grohls.
Okay.
But always when talking about the AKGs. So
Really?
I think that says something.
Yeah.
You have a love for,
The holy grail.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
We digress.
overhead mics. By adjusting the height, you're kind of bringing in, there's two things that are going to happen. One is you're going to get a different picture of the kit. Yeah. The other thing is you're going to get more or less information coming back from the room into the overhead mics. And depending on the quality of the room that you're tracking in, or the reverberation within the room, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. As you get further away from the kit, the cymbals start to dominate a little bit. You start to lose some of the focus on the shells. The cymbals don't sound as direct, but just, the top end is still carrying where you're losing some of the body out of the drums, and you are going to get more of the information coming back from the room into them. In a really big room, that reverberation might be really far, like time-wise, from the hits. It might not be too distracting. In a small room that's not treated, it could be horrible. You could get a lot of kind of zingy frequencies coming back from the cymbals into the overheads. For me, 4 feet is about the holy grail, because you get a really good balance of the shells themselves. You get some of the room back. I did a session recently in a lovely studio, and I was so happy with how much room was coming through at that distance. It really did a lot to give the cymbals a bit more life. But in a bad room, it's not so far away to really make that a problem. I'd say start around there if you're really finding it's experimentation and personal taste. The other thing that will happen, the closer you get, the wider the image is going to get, and the less of the middle information of the kit. So if your drummer has a lot of cymbals like right in front of him, you might start to get less of that. Further away, you'll get more, but you also get more crosstalk. So cymbals on the right are going to be going more into the left overhead and vice versa. So the stereo image will start to narrow. Try the 4 feet thing. If you hate it, then I don't know. I can't imagine anyone hating that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.